This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Monday, June 14th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel begins a new era with a new prime minister, with Benjamin Netanyahu now gone. But what will the implications be for the Jewish state and its relations with the world, including the United States? We'll have the story from Jerusalem for you. Republicans in the Senate concerned President Joe Biden is sending mixed messages on Israel. We'll have a look at the issues they're concerned about. Should race be a factor in adoption? One leading evangelical adoption agency now says yes. Others disagree. We're going to bring you a variety of viewpoints on this issue. And praise leader Sean Foyt bringing his Let Us Worship tour to his hometown of Virginia Beach, and people from all walks of life praising God and embracing each other. All those stories and more are ahead in today's edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to begin this half hour in Israel, where a new coalition government is getting to work today. And for the first time in 12 years, Benjamin Netanyahu is no longer prime minister. As Chris Mitchell now reports from Jerusalem, it marks an historic sea of change in Israeli politics, with a new leader and one who is untested.
Today, the new government posed for the traditional picture with Israeli President Reuven Rivlin. On Sunday night, by the slimmest of margins, 60-59, the Knesset approved the new coalition government. During his speech, incoming Prime Minister Naftali Bennett was heckled constantly by members of the opposition. But Bennett, who was once Netanyahu's ally and now rival, recognized his former boss.
Thank
you, Benjamin Netanyahu, for many years of service and lots of achievements for Israel. As Prime Minister, you worked for many years with devotion and to our political and defensive power.
Netanyahu now serves as leader of the opposition and cited how his governments have transformed Israel.
Members of Knesset, our achievements from a marginal state to a rising power in the global arena, this is our way. Mine and my friends from the national bloc, my friends on the real right. And if it is destined for us to be in the opposition, we will do it with our backs straight until we topple this dangerous government and return to lead the country in our way.
Netanyahu questioned if Bennett would be willing to disagree with U.S. President Biden and vowed he would be back. Bennett now leads a checkerboard coalition of 8 parties representing left, center, right, and for the first time, an Arab Islamist party.
Well, it's true that this government has a very difficult path ahead of it, a narrow parliamentary majority, a very heterogeneous government, and in this respect, it will be challenging to keep it together.
Right after the vote, the new government held its first cabinet meeting. It faces daunting challenges at home and threats outside its borders. Still, earlier this year, Bennett told CBN News he was up to the job.
I'm ready to take that responsibility as former defense minister, former entrepreneur and CEO of companies. I think I've got what's necessary to pull Israel out of this hole and sort of go to the next phase of Israel as the startup nation.
While President Joe Biden congratulated Bennett, differences between the two allies on the Iranian nuclear deal may test the new government.
The renewal of the nuclear agreement with Iran is a mistake that will give legitimacy again to one of the darkest and most violent regimes in the world. Israel will not let Iran arm itself with a nuclear weapon. Israel is not part of the deal and will continue to maintain full freedom of action.
After 4 elections and more than 2 years of political paralysis, it remains to be seen if this new government will provide the stability many Israelis are hoping for.
Chris Mitchell joins us now. As we saw there, you've interviewed the Prime Minister. Tell us more about him and his ability to hold this coalition together.
Well, Ephraim, right now I can tell you that he's a religious man. He prayed at the end of his speech. Some people say that he's really the first Israeli religious leader since temple times. When we did our profile on him earlier, we learned that he's served in an elite special forces unit, one of Israel's top units. He fought in the 2006 Second Lebanon War. Actually, this morning he visited the grave of a comrade this morning who died in that war. He's really made millions as an entrepreneur. In his speech, he wants to bring Israelis together. In many ways, you could almost see that Israel, just like the United States, is really divided. But in his speech, he wants to promote Aliyah. He says he wants to turn a page with the relationship of Israel with the Israeli Arab citizens. But really what he faces right now is probably his toughest challenge. Is in your question, he's leading Israel and trying to keep this coalition together. The coalition really was cobbled together with one ideological glue holding them all together, and that was to be able to oust Prime Minister Netanyahu. So they've succeeded by the narrowest of margins. Actually, Ephraim, they had to bring in one MK, Minister of Knesset from the Labor Party, who had a spinal tap. She actually literally had to be brought in on a stretcher just to make sure that that she could break that tie of 59-59, and so the slimmest of margins. So can they agree to govern together? That's really the question right now. And will Israel actually go to their fifth election in the near future? That's what a lot of people are wondering. And in addition to that, Ephraim, they really face staunch opposition by former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. When we were editing our story this morning, Ephraim, we were wondering, you know, for 12 years we've been identifying Benjamin Netanyahu as Israel's Prime Minister. Now he's the leader of the opposition. It almost seems surreal, but this is a new reality, political reality here in Israel.
To unfold, what geopolitical issues will this new government face, including possible friction with the Biden administration?
Well, the biggest geopolitical thing they face right now is Iran. What's going to happen with Iran, and how will they deal with the nuclear ambitions of Iran? Right now, Naftali Bennett did say in his speech that he won't allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon, and that is going to be the big test with the Biden administration. The Biden administration right now is negotiating with Iran to go ahead and renew the Iranian nuclear deal. And so the question that Netanyahu asked yesterday in the Knesset was, is Naftali Bennett strong enough to stand up to the Biden administration? That will be a big test. The other big issues are the Abraham Accords, how much they're going to be able to pursue that, and also with the Palestinian Authority and negotiations about a two-state solution. That's something that the Biden administration wants to pursue. Naftali Bennett certainly doesn't want a two-state solution. One more area of friction between the Biden administration and this new government.
Well, now that the coalition is formed, what will be the test, the first test that is, for this new government, you think?
Well, Ephraim, some people say it's going to be tomorrow. And the reason for that is there's a flag march scheduled here in Jerusalem. Actually, if you remember back at the beginning of the recent war, there was a Jerusalem march celebrating the reunification of the city of Jerusalem. That was sort of interrupted by rockets fired by Hamas. And right now they want to renew that march. They want to go through the Muslim quarter, the Damascus Gate. Hamas is threatening that if that happens, it could lead to a new war, actually a regional war. The Palestinian Authority, too, is threatening that. In fact, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, are actually competing over who can be violent or warlike against Israel. So that's going to be probably their first test. And then down the road, the other achievements that Netanyahu has made, whether or not the diplomatic achievements like the Abraham Accords, like the relations with Vladimir Putin and Eastern Europe, can they hold those together? Those are all going to be tested by this new government starting tomorrow and as they go forward.
The world will be watching. Chris Mitchell, thank you so much. I want to remind you at home that we'll have a look at Republican concerns about President Biden's support for Israel in just a few minutes. But first, President Biden is in Brussels for a NATO summit to consult European allies on dealing with Russia and China. The president arrived Sunday after the G7 summit in England, and he's meeting with leaders of the Baltic states about the threat posed by Russia. Biden is meeting with European leaders prior to his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Geneva. That will happen on Wednesday. Here's a look now at some of the other headlines we're following for you in the CBN newsroom. A petition drive is underway calling for members of the Randolph, New Jersey School Board to resign after they dropped the names of holidays from the school calendar. So now Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Jewish days like Yom Kippur will simply be called a day off. The board said it didn't want to offend anyone or cause hurt feelings over the holiday names. A pro-life group is warning Americans about a bill reintroduced by Democrats last week that aims to override restrictions on third trimester abortions. The Women's Health Protection Act would allow abortion all the way until birth. It has been presented in every session of Congress since 2013, but has never been up for a vote. The pro-life Susan B. Anthony List pointed out that an overwhelming majority of Americans oppose, quote, abortion extremism. And in a story with biblical overtones, a lobster diver says he was swallowed by a whale but got out alive. The Cape Cod Times reports 56-year-old Michael Packard says he was underwater when he felt a shove of things that went completely black, and he realized he'd been swallowed by a whale. He began shaking the whale's head, and it surfaced and then expelled him. Coming up, 14 Republican senators sending a letter to President Biden saying he's sending mixed messages in support for Israel. We'll take a look at their criticisms when we come back.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Your news channel, your shows, the stories you care about. Anytime you want, anywhere you want. Download the CBN News app today.
Republican senators are warning President Biden is sending mixed messages on Israel with some of its actions towards the Palestinians. The president says he stands with the Jewish state, but critics question why he's sending taxpayer money to a UN agency for Palestinians that is linked to terrorism. The 14 GOP senators have sent a letter explaining their concerns. Abigail Robertson brings us the story now with a specific look at the policies these Republicans find so troubling.
Senator James Lankford says when it comes to U.S. support for Israel, the Biden administration is sending mixed messages. And he argues we need to reaffirm our commitment rather than distancing ourselves.
We stand with Israel, their ally, and America is opposed to terrorism.
One concern is the Biden administration's decision to reopen a Palestinian consulate in Jerusalem.
That's an important way for our country to engage with and provide support to the Palestinian people.
Lankford argues it sends the wrong message.
Our embassy is in Jerusalem. That's the focus there. Obviously, the Jewish state is their main headquarters, their Knesset, all their leadership offices are in Jerusalem. That should be a focus. So I have a real concern that sends a mixed message from the United States.
Add to that message plans to reopen a PLO mission here in Washington. Langford worries that could potentially have a negative impact on fighting terror.
I've worked very hard to be able to allow victims of terrorism that are Americans to also hold Palestinian leadership accountable in American courts. And the connection there is if they base any of the Palestinian efforts here in the United States and have a headquarters here in the United States, American families are able to sue Palestinians for damages and for loss for the acts of terrorism that have been carried out against some of these families.
Langford fears the administration is trying to find a way around that.
And definitely shouldn't send a mixed message to American families that are victims of terrorism that they're not going to be able to get their day in court.
Secretary of State Blinken also recently announced $30 million in U.S. tax dollars will go to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees.
I do not believe we should have restored the funding to that UN organization that handles refugees. They handle refugees in the Palestinian areas different than they handle refugees anywhere else in the world.
Even Blinken recently acknowledged the UN group spreads anti-Semitic education materials, erasing Israel from maps.
We need to make sure the schools are actually not teaching hatred and bigotry to the next generation.
And Langford argues the group is not working to resettle the Palestinian refugees.
And the UN will not allow the Palestinians to be able to integrate in other areas because the theory is that they're going to move back to Israel and they're going to take over Israel in the future. That's absurd. Their focus there is to be able to drive the Jews out of Israel and have that not be a Jewish state anymore. That's not going to happen and should not happen. But that UN organization seems to be focused on that issue.
The Biden administration, however, insists support for Israel is strong.
Our stalwart support, our ironclad support for Israel will remain.
Republicans are also concerned with the Biden administration's plans to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal, arguing Iran is funding terrorist enemies of Israel like Hamas and Hezbollah. Reporting from Virginia, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Still ahead, should race be a factor in adoption? One of the nation's largest evangelical adoption agencies believes it should, while others disagree. We're going to hear wide-ranging views on this issue when we come back. Stay with us.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep. As the world watches from the outside,
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Should race be a factor in adoption? One of the nation's largest evangelical adoption agencies says the answer is yes, and that opinion has landed them right in the middle of the woke wars. Caitlin Burke brings us a look at the variety of viewpoints on this discussion.
There's a federal law on the books that prohibits race from being a factor in an adoption. The Multi-Ethnic Placement Act, or MIPA, is intended to remove barriers to adopting children of color. Now, one major evangelical adoption agency wants the law changed.
Bethany Christian Services says the law limits proper education of parents before a transracial adoption. That's because under the law, all adoptions must be treated the same, whether white parents are adopting white children or children of color. Following the death of George Floyd, there was an outcry from Bethany families who wanted help talking about race with their children. For now, parents who want more resources can attend optional trainings put on by Bethany or outside organizations like Be the Bridge.
From the very beginning, from jump, a white parent should have the tools and they should have the language and the understanding about how to help a child of color grow into a healthy racial identity, grow into a healthy sense of who God made them to be in all God made them to be.
Tiffany Hennis helps provide transracial adoption training at Be the Bridge. She's also Asian American and was adopted by a white family.
What really strikes me when I think back over my life is that my parents tried to encourage me to have a positive identity, but they didn't know some of the things that were in the environment around us that was teaching me to hate the Chinese or Asian part of myself, because that's what made me different. That's what made me different from my family.
Hennis says that while her family did their best, she feels their colorblind philosophy was short-sighted.
I could not educate them at 4 years old or 8 years old or 16 years old. I only knew, I only knew so much. So if my parents had had some training, if they had had relationships with Asian Americans who were helping them understand the context of some of the comments or the jokes they would have been able to be proactive as parents to help guide me through those things.
Still, not everyone in the adoption community agrees this kind of special training should be required.
You want to learn more, so that's kind of a natural thing. You don't need an agency to force you into this. This is it's the natural curiosity because you want to know how best to parent that child.
Ryan Baumberger, co-founder of the Radiance Foundation, was also raised in a transracial home. Adopted in 1971, his parents defied restrictions about Black children being placed with white families.
They understood that they were called to love, first and foremost. They didn't set out to adopt a Black child, a Vietnamese child, a Native American. They just wanted to adopt those that the world said would be unwanted and unloved.
Statistically, there are more Black children languishing in foster care than there are Black families volunteering to adopt them. Baumberger is concerned Bethany's desire to not only consider race in adoption, but also assess prospective parents, will act as a barrier to white families, which he says could make it nearly impossible for them to adopt children of color.
I have a lot of parents who've come up to me in all the events that the Radiance Foundation does across the country, and they have been dissuaded from adopting simply because they're white or because they don't have a certain quota of Black friends or a certain quota of Asian friends. And that, to me, is really destructive.
Other critics claim Bethany is bowing to the woke movement, being influenced by critical race theory, and shifting towards the left. In a statement to CBN News, Bethany said it will continue to celebrate transracial adoptions and that what they're trying to do is, quote, equip families who are adopting transracially to understand their adoptive children and support them as they develop a sense of who they are. Hennis says she's focused on those who want to listen and learn because she knows all too well what's at stake.
You can discredit or not listen or whatever because it's a woke movement thing, but I'm a person who is trying to understand who God made me to be and how come I experience the world this way and what my place is here. And that's really what it comes down to.
Bethany is calling for all U.S. child welfare policies to be updated to ensure all children in the system reach an equal outcome. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Coming up, worship leader Sean Foyt brings his Let Us Worship Summer Tour to his hometown of Virginia Beach this weekend, where people from all walks of life sang, danced, and exalted the name of God. We'll have the story for you when we come back. Please stay with us.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Worship leader Sean Foyt brought his Let Us Worship summer tour to his hometown of Virginia Beach Friday, where hundreds came out to proclaim the name of Jesus. Due to severe weather conditions, the event was moved indoors at Rock Church, but that did not stop people from showing up to encounter God. The event was full of powerful praise as people sang and danced, and worshipers from all different walks of life lifted their hands toward heaven in prayer and embraced each other. Foyt and his team encouraged those suffering from addiction, anxiety, and depression to be set free and receive God's amazing love. Bodies were healed and souls were saved as the brokenhearted laid their burdens on the altar. And Foyt said, quote, "We need a revival in America, and that's what we're pressing in for. That's what we're believing for in every city we go to." You can read more about Foyt's Let Us Worship tour and upcoming events at cbnnews.com. Time now for your Monday motivation. I want to leave you with this thought as we begin this week together. The promises of God do not come without the principles of God. Work His principles and His promises will follow. That's good news. We serve a God who honors His promises and His principles. With that word, I encourage you to make today a marvelous Monday, and be sure to have yourself a wonderful week and do it on purpose. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about any of the stories you've seen here today. You can email us. The address is right there at the bottom of the screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, and God bless.